Svitolina hit some good shot. I'm really happy that I was able to kind of keep my rhythm.
There is a ticket sitting in a drawer somewhere in Washington tonight. Maybe it is a small piece of paper, or perhaps a QR code saved on someone's phone. It was purchased weeks ago, back when everyone expected the story of the 2026 Mubadala City DC Open to belong to someone else.
As she beats Svitolina for the second time in as many months.
It was bought with a plan in mind. That plan featured Elena Svitolina, the world number 10 and one of the leading contenders on the women's side.
She played really well. I mean, she played a good grass court season, and it was, not an easy battle for me.
The plan also included four-time Grand Slam champion Naomi Osaka.
I mean, I've never played Alex before. She's had an incredible year so far.
It also featured tennis legend Venus Williams.
Talent that changed the sport forever. And when I tell you that Alex Eala is different.
And Jessica Pegula was part of that lineup too.
Has done well and established herself as a really good player on tour.
And Leylah Fernandez, the defending champion whose face was featured prominently in the tournament's promotional campaign.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to hear that everyone in the Philippines is cheering for me.
What that ticket did not include when it was printed, priced, and sold was Alexandra Eala. She was 21 years old, ranked 28th in the world, and unseeded in the draw. And yet, inside the 17,500 square feet of asphalt and painted lines that make up the main stadium court at Rock Creek Park, in a venue that seats 7,500 people, that same ticket had suddenly become the hottest piece of paper in Washington sports that weekend. Because the plan had changed. It changed on Friday afternoon, when Eala defeated Svitolina 6-3, 6-4 in just 1 hour and 28 minutes. To understand what really happened, you have to pull back the curtain on how a professional tennis tournament is built. The DC Open is the fifth largest professional tennis event in the United States. Its chairman, Mark Ine, told WTOP in mid-July that the tournament was already about 97% sold out, a full week before the gates opened. The event featured 5 top 10 players across the combined field, for Grand Slam champions, and 4 former DC Open champions. On paper, it was already a commercial success. Alexandra Eala was not part of that original marquee lineup. She arrived in Washington as an unseeded player on the women's side, carrying a career-high ranking she had reached just 18 days earlier. She also brought the same Berlin-hardened backhand she had used 5 weeks earlier to knock Svitolina out in the quarterfinals in Germany. Same opponent. Same score, incidentally, 6-3, 6-4. Remember that. And here is the tension, because I want to frame this fairly. There is no villain in this story. The DC Open did its job. Ine and his team had pre-sold the tournament to near capacity on the strength of a legitimate marquee field. Ushers were briefed. Broadcast rundowns were built around expected quarterfinals and semifinals. Sponsors were told which players would appear on which show courts. Everything had been planned around the field they expected. So when I say the story of this tournament escaped its planners, I do not mean anyone at the DC Open failed. I mean the opposite. They built a tournament strong enough to handle whatever came out of the draw. And what came out of that draw was a Filipina player whose growing fan base created a demand that no traditional North American ticketing model was really designed to anticipate. That gap between the original plan and the reality is what you are watching unfold this week. Not a villain. A market catching up to a player. The WTA did not need to issue an official statement of shock about the situation. It did not need to. The ticket resale pages were already telling the story. The tournament's own Instagram graphics were announcing that tickets had sold out. And Philippine sports outlet One Sports PHL reported on August 1st that standard and premier seats for both the semifinals and finals were already gone. The numbers spoke for themselves. This is what it looks like when a tour suddenly wakes up to a semi-final it never expected to have. Now, the evidence matters. Because a headline about a sold-out semi-final only carries real weight if you understand how a player who was barely featured on the tournament's promotional posters actually got there. There are 6 moments that matter, and they fall into 3 groups. The first is the original plan. Before Eala hit a single ball in Washington, WTOP's July reporting had already established the ceiling of the event's ambition. It was roughly 97% sold. Svitolina and Osaka were the women's headliners. Leylah Fernandez was returning as the defending champion. Eala was technically part of the undercard. She was not the reason the arena had filled. And that distinction matters, because it gives us a clear baseline for understanding what she did next. Then came the disruption. Round 1, July 27th, against Zheng Qinwen. Eala dropped the opening set 4-6 and, according to Washington Times coverage from that night, found herself in serious trouble before fighting her way back into the match. She eventually won 4-6, 6-4, 6-1. But the score was only part of the story. The other part was the atmosphere. The Washington Times described the crowd around Eala as the DC Open's most boisterous crowd so far. And that was the first documented sign that something inside Rock Creek Park was beginning to change. That is not simply fan sentiment. That is a print reporter's description filed on the night of the match, and it was the first documented signal that something inside Rock Creek Park was beginning to shift. Then came the second round. Leylah Fernandez, the defending champion, the player whose likeness appeared throughout the tournament's returning champion marketing. Eala won. One marquee name was suddenly off the board. Then came the quarterfinal, and this is where the pattern started to look like a signature. Elena Svitolina, world number 10 and the number 2 seed at the event. Eala beat her 6-3, 6-4, in a performance ESPN described as a return game masterpiece. She won 24 return points to Svitolina's 13, broke serve 4 times in the opening set alone, and then produced one final break in the 10th game of the second set to close the match. It was Eala's 6th top 10 victory of 2026 and her 3rd WTA Tour semifinal of the season. But there was an even more important detail. It was the second time in 5 weeks that Eala had beaten Svitolina by the exact same score. Berlin quarterfinal, 6-3, 6-4. Washington quarterfinal, 6-3, 6-4. Different surface. Different city. Same fingerprint. That is not simply a hot streak. That is a matchup where a Filipina left-hander now appears to have developed a tactical read on one of the world's best players. And take a breath here, because the next part is something almost nobody stops to notice. Between the moment Eala walked off Stadium Court on Friday afternoon and the moment her semi-final opponent was confirmed later that evening, something quiet but enormous was happening inside the tournament's ticketing operation. Whatever inventory was still available, and there was inventory because 97% sold is not 100% sold, suddenly tightened. According to One Sports PHL's August 1st reporting and the tournament's own communications, standard and premier seats for both the semi-final and final were gone. That is what a ticket cascade looks like in real time. It is not a WTA announcement. It is a spreadsheet changing faster than anyone can update it. And that brings us to the third part of the story, the room. The semi-final lineup now featured Jessica Pegula against Anna Kalinskaya on one side, and Naomi Osaka against Alexandra Eala on the other. 3 of those 4 players have either been world number 1, Grand Slam champions, or both. Eala was ranked 28th in the world and unseeded. But she was also the 4th name at that table. Her career record against top 10 opponents now stood at 8 wins and 4 losses across her young WTA career. Her 2026 top 10 victories included Jasmine Paolini in Dubai, Coco Gauff at Indian Wells, Elena Rybakina in Berlin, Svitolina in Berlin, Iga Swiatek at Wimbledon in the round of 32, and now Svitolina again in Washington. 6 top 10 wins. 3 semi-finals. 1 season. And that is what this final cluster of evidence is really showing you. It is not that Eala simply got lucky with a favorable draw. It is that the ceiling of what she can do keeps moving higher. The authority voice here is the one we already met, and I want to use him carefully because he never predicted this specific outcome. Mark Ein, the DC Open chairman since 2019, told WTOP before the tournament, quote, "It's going to be another amazing summer of tennis in DC. We know how much people in DC love this event, and it's going to be another great one." He was talking about his top 10 players, his Grand Slam champions, and his defending champions. He was not talking about Alex Eala. He didn't need to. What matters is that the ceiling he described for the tournament, an amazing, sold-out summer week, was ultimately met and then exceeded from a direction his original marketing plan had not anticipated. The tournament sold out its plan. Then it sold out around a player who wasn't part of that plan. And the second clearest authority voice in this story isn't a pundit. It is Svitolina herself. Previewing the Washington rematch with the WTA on the eve of the quarterfinal, 5 weeks after their meeting in Berlin, she said, Quote, "It was not an easy battle for me. Tomorrow is a new surface, new country, a new city." That was the world number 10 publicly recalibrating her expectations against a player ranked 18 places below her. When your opponent tells you the matchup is difficult before you even step onto the court, the matchup is difficult. Svitolina walked onto that court on Friday knowing exactly what Eala was capable of. And it happened anyway. Now the stakes stretch beyond Washington. Because this is where a WTA 500 event in late July suddenly becomes relevant to the US Open seeding conversation in late August. If Eala beats Osaka on Saturday night, Sunday's final at Rock Creek will feature either Eala against Pegula or Eala against Kalinskaya. A WTA 500 final on hard court, just 3 weeks before a Grand Slam played on the same surface. That is not a hypothetical. That is Saturday's math. Even if Eala loses to Osaka, a former world number 1 who won her own quarterfinal on Friday in 3 sets against Elisabetta Cocciaretto, 4-6, 6-4, 6-3, the significance of this run does not disappear. This semifinal is already Eala's first at the WTA 500 level. Beyond Washington, the calendar moves to the National Bank Open in Montreal, then Cincinnati, and finally Flushing Meadows. Eala enters that stretch at or near her career-high ranking of number 28, with a real chance to earn a seeding at a Grand Slam for the first time in her career. And then there is the market story. Because what happened this week in Washington is bigger than one tournament. A WTA 500 event on the American East Coast just saw its demand curve shift because of a player from a country that does not currently host an ADP or WTA tour-level event. The Philippines reaches professional tennis largely through its diaspora, through the players it produces, and through moments like Friday afternoon at Rock Creek Park. What happened at the DC Open box office may be one of the clearest signals the tour has received yet about what that audience can do when thousands of Filipino fans are concentrated in a major U.S. metropolitan area and given a reason to buy tickets. That is a business story. It is also a sports growth story. And both can be true without exaggeration. But I owe you the vulnerability moment, because none of this happened cleanly. Just 3 weeks earlier, Eala was in the Wimbledon round of 16, facing Jasmine Paolini. She lost 6-4, 4-6, 6-4, ending what had already been the deepest Grand Slam run of her career. She flew from London to Washington with only a few weeks to respond. And in her opening match against Zhang, that response almost never came. She dropped the first set. She fell into trouble again in the second. Then she fought her way back. Afterward, in a courtside interview with Tennis Channel, Eala explained what she had found in the noise around her. The same crowd she would later describe as feeling like home. And that is the razor's edge this entire run has lived on. Because if even one of those points had gone differently on July 27th, none of what followed would exist. No Fernandez victory. No Svitolina rematch. No sold-out semifinal. No Saturday night against Osaka. The story you are watching this weekend was, at one point, almost not a story at all. So here is where we land. Somewhere in Washington tonight, there is a ticket sitting in a drawer, or a QR code saved on someone's phone. It was purchased weeks ago, priced around one plan, and now it is being redeemed against an entirely different reality. There is a stadium court that seats roughly 7,500 people, with its standard and premium seating sold out for a semi-final that the tournament's original marketing plan never anticipated. And there is a draw sheet printed on tournament paper with 4 names going into Saturday night: Jessica Pegula, Anna Kalinskaya, Naomi Osaka, Alexandra Eala. 3 of those 4 players have been world number 1, Grand Slam champions, or both. The 4th is 21 years old, ranked number 28, and playing the first WTA 500 semi-final of her career. She did not receive that spot as a favor. She earned it. She took the chair. And whatever happened Saturday night, the room she is sitting in now is the room she has earned. That is not a promotion. It is a fact printed on a tournament draw. Mark Ine said this was going to be an amazing summer of tennis in Washington. He was right. It just arrived from a direction nobody on the marketing side had planned for. If this is the kind of story you want more of, long-form, evidence-driven, and respectful of both the player and the tournament she is disrupting, stay with us through the weekend. Saturday's semi-final against Osaka is the next chapter. Whatever happens next, Alexandra Eala has already earned her seat at the table.